Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The Chinese PLA has concluded 2 days of military drills around the island of Taiwan, which involved vessel and aircraft formations in coordination with conventional missile troops and long-range rocket launching systems. The drills are meant as a warning message against both the separatist forces inside Taiwan and external powers interfering with China's national reunification efforts. What more do we know about the drills? Why did the PLA choose this time to conduct the exercise? And what has been the reaction to the drills? Join us for discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Jingduo. Joining me today are Zhou Bo, Senior Fellow at Center for International Security and Strategy in Tsinghua University, Anthony Moretti, Associate Professor at Robert Morris University, Warwick Powell, Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute, and Wang Yuqing, commentator from Taiwan. Welcome to Dialogue. Well, Zhou Bo, I will start with you. These drills were carried out by the PLA Eastern Theater Command in the waters to the north, south, and east of Taiwan Island. They involved drills on assaults on maritime targets, strikes on ground objects, and joint blockade and control. So what are the primary objectives or the purposes of the military drill?
Well, for the military, of course, they're ready for fight, right? And I think in this case, I believe during the whole period of Lai Ching-te's term, you are going to see more and more exercises like this. Because he's a diehard secessionist, and I don't believe the mainland has a lot of confidence in him for him to change his heart. So this kind of military rehearsal basically would be meant for the worst scenario when we have to use force. However, this would not suggest that this is inevitable, but for the military, of course, it is a must. And through all these kind of exercises, we can actually find our problems, in terms of our preparation and make a better coordination and synchronization of all armed forces, of all services.
Anthony, what about the background? We talked about, the lack of confidence in Lai Ching from the mainland side. And what about the timing here?
Well, I think the timing it makes sense if you think about, a week or two ago, he announced very publicly and very forcefully that he considers China to be a threat to the island, a major hostile force. And called out specific segments of society, suggesting that, they were probably working with the mainland to try to undermine Taiwan and any hopes it may have for, what may happen in the future. So, I think part of this is, look, if you want to truly play a risky game of which the circumstances might not necessarily be all that guaranteed, here's what you're looking at as a potential response from China. And so I think the message now is a response to, this is not a hostile force you're looking at. This is a force that believes in the rejuvenation of China and the reunification with Taiwan. And if you choose not to get on board with this, here's what you might be looking at.
Warwick, of course, Lai Ching has been rather aggressive in terms of pushing for his separatist agenda. For example, of course, as Anthony has mentioned, he called the mainland as a foreign hostile force. Of course, that's undermining seriously the One China principle. He mapped out 17 strategies basically to punish those who are seen as pro-reunification with the mainland. So, of course, the response, we can understand that. Are these drills any different from the previous drills over the years?
Look, I think in many ways they're a continuation of a program to progressively refine the coordination capacity, as Zhou Bo mentioned. And they're also a demonstration of the speed with which the PLAN and associated forces can actually respond and mobilize in this part of the world. I think it's also important to note that it is a demonstration of the People's Republic of China's willingness and commitment to demonstrate its sovereign capacity to protect its sovereign territory, including the island of Taiwan, and to do that both in relation to Taiwanese separatist forces, but also in relation to external disturbances. And this brings me to Lai, actually. I think that there are two things that he's responding to. One is a domestic set of circumstances where, in fact, he was not elected with a majority of votes and he does not control the legislature. He is concerned that his domestic political position is fragile. At the same time, no doubt he is also concerned that the Trump administration is not necessarily as committed to his cause as was the previous administration, and the backdrop of a potential withdrawal of America from global affairs no doubt weighs heavily on his mind. And his recent statements was an attempt to draw the United States back in, and he found some friends in Pete Hegseth and the Department of Defense.
Now let's have Wang Yuqing, the commentator from Taiwan. Yuqing, welcome to the show. What has been the public opinion in Taiwan of Lai Ching-te's aggressive strategy, to basically ditch this one China principle since he came to power?
As I think, people in Taiwan think about Lai Ching-te is a troublemaker, okay? Because the cross-strait before is very peaceful. Nobody really wants to go to war. That's first thing. Second thing, the most of Taiwan, especially Taiwan young people, really kind of scared because they worry about the Lai Ching-te will be extended army service. Also, they really complain about the Lai Ching-te regard his son and his grandson even not live in Taiwan and try to escape the military service. So that's why a lot of young people really kind of worry and scared raise up the situation. Also, they think about many people in Taiwan think about Lai Ching-te is a big troublemaker. So that's all. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the public response, at the military drills in recent years, including the latest one, of course, conducted by the PLA? I'm guessing, given how aggressive Lai Ching-te has been in pushing forward this, separatist agenda to get an independent Taiwan, so I guess the people are expecting there will be a response from the mainland, like in the form of military drills.
Yeah. Well, I think the people in Taiwan talk about the military drill really kind of worry because I really have young people tell me about what he going to do after if cross-strait have the war. Is he going to move to mainland China or other else? So what I think is that's kind of worry. Also, I have one point really want to share everybody is Lai Ching-te not just aggressive in military. He also aggressive in prosecution for the people have different thoughts with him. The past day, I believe, past week, I believe everybody already seen the Yaya's case, and Yaya just saying she supported the unification, and then what happened is Lai Ching-te regime was kick out her to Taiwan, and then what happened is people feel kind of green terror about the Lai Ching-te. That's a key thing. So what I see is the people in Taiwan talk about Lai Ching-te mostly talk about he's kind of troublemaker. Even I see some people really try to try to say, Lai Ching-te saying those things that represent to us because we don't want war. But if you want to have a drill, really to Taiwan, please to prosecute the right pursue the right person, not the people in Taiwan. So that's why, yeah.
Well, thank you, Yuqing, for joining the discussion. Let me get back to Zhou Bo. Of course, with the military drills in recent years, including the latest one, and also take into consideration of Lai Qingde's reckless provocation. For example, the chill, being produced by his 17 strategies to punish those who are seen as pro-unification, and then calling China, the mainland, as a foreign hostile forces. Do you think these cross-strait relations, are we seeing tensions rising across the straits?
Of course, because this kind of calling mainland as a foreign hostile force basically is kind of a de facto declaration of independence, right? And this basically means that across the strait we have 2 states. So in theory, this is enough, for mainland to use force. But I believe until even at this moment, we are still hearing Chinese leaders talking about peaceful reunification. Actually, the top legislator Zhou Bo has mentioned this point. We still stick to the peaceful reunification. But at the same time, I believe the situation is really becoming dangerous because it seems that nothing can change. The Lai Qingde, and so the only thing we can do is to prepare ourselves better militarily, and this, of course, with the PLA developing by leaps and bounds, our confidence about ourselves is certainly growing. So I think there is no doubt whatsoever that Taiwan, should there would be a war, Taiwan would be definitely defeated. Of course, there is a question, that is, what is the cost, right? So there is a cost, and how heavy is the cost? That is for us. That is the question for us. But there's no doubt about the defeat of Taiwan, the DPP party. And the whole island problem.
The separatist politicians over there, of course, you want to have a deterring force, which is strong enough to prevent any, let's say, the worst scenario. Zhou Bo, how do you read the goal of Lai Qingde and his supporters there? Is he trying to draw attention from Washington, or is he trying to, get a support from Washington? Why was he pushing so hard for this, for his independence of the separatist agenda?
Well, of course he would look up to Washington, but for Washington, how can he survive, right? So there's no doubt about that. But actually, if we talk about the Taiwanese policy of second Trump, actually it's not so clear, because so far he only talked about how Taiwanese should pay. But this actually would invite more questions as to how much should Taiwanese pay, and pay for what, right? Even some American think tank would argue that instead of providing Taiwan such a big combat platform like F-16 or heavy tanks, probably it's more useful to provide them more with short-range missiles, drones, so on and so forth. But then, of course, it would invite some other questions. The American military-industrial complex would want to earn money. So there's money, of course, selling them to big tanks and aircraft certainly would be much more lucrative than selling them drones, right? So all these issues are much complicated. But it's too early at this stage to say what Trump's, Taiwanese policy would be.
Well, Anthony, yes, we don't have a clear picture of what Trump's policy on China, on the Taiwan question is, but we do have the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth's recent visit to Asia. He talked about America being committed to a credible deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, including across the Taiwan Strait. So what is a signal? Is there a concern that such a kind of talk may embolden the separatist politicians inside Taiwan to take some risks that will lead to, a kind of worse scenario?
I think one of the challenges was mentioned in a couple of the last answers, which is number one, where does the Trump administration stand? It seems like about the only thing you can be certain of with this president is that if it has the word tariffs in mind, he's happy about it. Everything else, he appears to be either disinterested, confused, saying this today, saying that tomorrow. And I think too, there also is a credibility issue here. And what I mean by that is with every recent president of the United States, discluding the first term of Donald Trump, when the U.S. spoke about strategic ambiguity, would we help Taiwan militarily? Would we not? Et cetera. That at least was seen as stable, consistent policy, or at least a stable, consistent answer. And now what we wonder is, just what is the administration after? Is it after a deal? Is it after being able to sell more items militarily? And I think that the only reason here in the West, perhaps that the story of the drills of the last couple of days didn't get as much attention is, again, because of all these talks about tariffs in the United States. But when you peel back a layer a little bit, you realize when the U.S. conducts drills in that area, what are the words that you hear? Strategic partnerships, preparation, better communication. They put these nice spin on what these military exercises are, knowing full well that Beijing is upset by them. But now what I anticipate we're going to hear is that, these drills are nothing more than an indication of how China can't be trusted on the world stage, and it's dangerous and it's reckless. And yes, such language, should it come out, or such rhetoric rather, should it come out, could have the potential in an environment right now that exists between the mainland and the island for the leaders of Taiwan to think, what, maybe the White House is on our side. I wouldn't be convinced of anything, however, involving this White House and whose side it's on, unless the president believes there's a deal that can be made. And with Taiwan, I'm not so sure there's a deal that can be made unless it involves selling military equipment.
Anthony, what about this related, point to the secretary calling Japan, for example, during his stop in Tokyo, calling Japan an indispensable warrior country or war-fighting base to counter China. Of course, some media in Japan is in almost like a panic call mode. Like, no, we are not the frontier country against China. And we have a close trade relationship with China, and we want stability in this region. So what is the concern of Japan? They don't want to somehow be in the position of a proxy war against China or over Taiwan there?
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Japan believes that the relationship with Taiwan or with China rather, is first and foremost based on the idea of trade. And the more trade and the more economic agreements and the more people-to-people exchanges, et cetera, that take place, the stronger the ties between Beijing and Tokyo, the better the entire region is going to be. And I agree. I don't think Japan wants any talk of being, you're our ally, so you're going to have to be on our side in any kind of conflict. I think Japan is looking and saying, look, after a couple of decades of the economic problems we've had here at home, the last thing we want to do is potentially wreck the economy, the Japanese economy, further by engaging in any kind of warfare, unless it is specifically for a defensive and necessary purpose. And clearly, I don't think anyone in Tokyo is going to say that aligning with the U.S. At this point would be considered a defensive or necessary military situation. And so, yes, I could see why in Japan, why there was real fear about this, because I don't think Japan wants any part of any conflict right now.
Of course, that also has something to do with the U.S. policy toward its the allies, Warwick, and given what happened to the European countries, to Ukraine, of course, countries like Japan, they do have concerns about what the U.S. policy will really be, right? And also this, we talked about Lai Ching-te being aggressive to draw attention, to get support from Washington, etc. Now we have these military drills, basically pretty frequently, at least twice last year and this year, of course, the latest response. Do you think the message is clear to the leaders in Taiwan, to the people in Taiwan, that if you pursue such independence, pursue such a separatist agenda, and that it will not end well?
Look, I think in terms of Lai Ching-te, whatever message is being sent, he will be 100% deaf ears to them. He is locked in and he is not for turning. The audience, if you will, is going to be the citizens that live on the island, as well as the representatives of the other political parties who actually continue to have a majority in the legislature and combined actually achieved more votes and public support than Lai Ching-te did. So I think it's important to bear in mind who the audience is. That's the first thing. The second part is an international audience, and that in part is the United States, but it's also to others in the region. And you mentioned the recent events in Europe as a case in point in terms of the United States' willingness to provoke and trample on red lines in different parts of the world with the intentions of stoking tensions and creating instabilities, particularly in and around the territories of those that it sees as threats or as adversaries. So what's going on in relation to the island has to be situated within the broader American strategic context, and that is very clear. The United States sees China as its principal adversary. The Defense Department made clear in a memo circulated, according to the Washington Post, that China is its sole, quote, pacing adversary. All of these actions is revolving around that particular strategic intent. Whether Lai likes it or not, Washington will do what Washington thinks is in Washington's best interest, and he will be cannon if necessary.
Mm-hmm. What does that to do with the Taiwan question, Warwick? You talked about, in this memo, they see China as this pacing adversary of Washington. What kind of role does China play in this relationship here?
The main objective here is to create destabilization in and around China's peripheries so that China is kept on back foot. The question of Taiwan Island is seen as part of a strategic effort to keep China contained, both militarily but also in terms of its general ambitions in the region at large. And all of this is aimed at creating, I guess, a ring fence to try to keep China under control and limit China's ability to exercise its rightful development path, and through that to participate in the region as a whole. That's what I mean when I say that the island of Taiwan is part of a broader American strategic framework that aims to contain China and seek to prolong American primacy.
Mm-hmm. Zhou Bo, of course, if you, we don't know, as I said, the clear picture of the U.S. policy on China over the Taiwan question, but we do know, for example, in the State Department fact sheet on Taiwan, for the first time, they removed this one China principle. And that sets a signal, at least. People will read that into, okay, more or less, U.S. is getting clearer, let's say, over their, let's say, what do we call a strategy of ambiguity. How is the Chinese side concerned with that kind of policy?
Well, I can assure you, all the American administrations would talk about a one China policy. Yes, Biden got 4 times, but still his aide would try to walk him back, right, to say that we have not changed on this one China policy. But the question is, within this big basket, how many things are indeed there So we in mainland China believe that actually this policy is being hollowed out, right? So we do not really believe in that, and that is the problem. And actually, Americans themselves have started to think almost in another way. Some scholars like Richard Haas has suggested to turn this strategic ambiguity into kind of a strategic clarity. That is to make it clear that the United States will defend Taiwan. But of course, he's refuted by some other scholars like Bonnie Glaser and so on and so forth. So I believe at the policy level, American government will always talk about one China. But if they continue to sell arms or even sell more arms to Taiwan, or if they would collude with such a kind of such a real diehard separatists like Lai Ching-te, the confidence in mainland China will simply be reduced. And that would be the most dangerous point. Why? Because according to our law, anti-secession law, the last condition is most important. That is, if the Chinese government believes that all possibilities of peaceful reunifications are exhausted, then we might have to apply non-peaceful means. So that would be the most dangerous time. That is, the question is, do we still have patience or do we still have confidence, right? So this is the question of patience versus confidence. If the rest of the world would just support China's goal of peaceful reunification and would take concrete measures to stop any separatist moves in Taiwan, I believe the central government would have more confidence and the government would not be impatient.
Well said. I think a former Minister for Singapore, George Ye, recently talked about the Taiwan issue. He said like the best way for Taiwan in terms of their interests is the peaceful reunification, because otherwise, violence will bring nothing good to Taiwan. But the thing is like whether that kind of window is closing because of Lai Ching-te, his provocative remarks and his stance, hardline, views against the Chinese mainland. Do you think this still have time to, to achieve peaceful reunification?
Well, I think that people always talk about the stick in the hand of mainland China, and people always forget that we have actually offered a lot of carrots. For example, in Fujian province, we give a lot of good treatment to the Taiwanese, including letting them buy houses, letting the children go to kindergartens, almost like any Chinese children. Or we even give them ID cards that are not quite different from our own ID card. And that is precisely why Lai Ching-te would try to prevent these from happening. And between Fujian and Kinmen, we have for long provided them fresh waters. And we actually have been discussing about providing electricity, gas, or even building a bridge. So all these are goodwill gestures that are welcomed by Taiwanese people. So we just cannot say that, Lai Ching-te, can do whatever he wants. But I believe the Taiwanese people can also think about all these, whether this guy, as just the Taiwanese commentator has described, is really a troublemaker for them or not.
Very briefly, Warwick, what do you see as the prospect, of a peaceful dialogue resolution there?
Look, I remain hopeful that the authorities in Beijing have sufficient confidence to provide them with the patience to leave that open. I think that there is a majority of people on the island who do not want a conflict. The troublemakers do represent a minority voice, even if they are vocal, and that needs to be taken into account. And ultimately, I think the experience of Ukraine and others in other parts of the world and the way that the Americans push others into fighting America's wars will ultimately not assist the separatists. And we can look forward to reunification peacefully.
On that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Xu Qinduo. See you next time.